And we're back, and we're officially at legal drinking age in the US, Brent, episode 21.
Yep. We're legal now in every country. So the
There you
pursuit
are.
of pints, responsible consumption. So yeah, be of legal drinking age. But we made it. So
And I think this week, Brent, I think very interesting exploring the Chilean malt supply chain, which I certainly learned a lot about Chile in the process. But before we dive into the Chilean malt supply chain, I think there's quite a lot to talk about in what's happening in the global malt supply chain. Firstly, I think the weather. For once, does the weather seem to be playing to our favor, or not?
yeah, well, I think we're kind of in a way, Danielle, we're in a little bit of an in between. I think the weather in say Europe, for example, the weather's been pretty good. We had some early rain, which caused some slight delays in planting the spring crop. But that that cleared up and very quickly I would say the European spring crop has got planted, which is good. And because it had been raining, that started off with pretty good soil moisture. So yes, I guess the tale of two cities. The first
Yeah.
part was pretty good. The second part is since that initial rain, it hasn't rained hardly at all, certainly in France. So now we start to get more and more there's the comments and commentary coming around that it is turning dry. It's very nice in Europe. Like the weather is more summer-like than spring. So maybe we've turned the corner very quickly, which might help beer demand also. But from a pure, I feel like I'm now in my weatherman mode. I'm going to be
Yeah.
looking at the weather chart and be like, there's clouds over France. Maybe it'll rain. Maybe it won't. But generally speaking, it's turned the water has turned off. So if it stays this way, I think what people are starting to talk more about is it could become something that would impact yields and potential quality if it sustains. So if it continues, but it could change. One good weekend of rain and this thing would be totally different. So I think the weather market has started. I guess is the way I would summarize it. We're now in a weather market, which seems a bit early.
I mean, it's also tricky because we know beer consumption is so massively impacted by the weather as well. So I think after an awful summer last year, in across a lot of Europe in terms of summer rain, I think the hospitality industry is probably hoping for some sun, but the downside of that, of course, is the crop.
Yeah, very small sample size, Danielle, but we had a food fest in Little Zug, Switzerland this weekend, and the weather was perfect. And I
Yeah,
have to think there were a lot of people pursuing the perfect pint.
exactly,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? So when the weather, and that happens a lot, when the weather's out,
Yeah.
everyone's out and they're down, in our case, they're down at the lake enjoying. So yeah, if we get an early start, I was saying this over the weekend, if we get an early start, like is maybe shaping up, that's a good thing because there's been lots of examples where you have a slow start, you can never make up the slow start. If you have a rainy April, May,
Yeah.
you can't recover from it. But if you get a good start, then it really changes the way the year shapes up. So I think we're maybe, yes, good for beer drinking. I guess my point was mildly starting to be some concern that if we don't get some rain at some stage, then the crop problem. The perfect solution is it should rain like on Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday afternoon,
Yes,
and then clear up Thursday afternoon, and everyone gets out and pursues the perfect pint and
absolutely.
repeat it again the next week. I think that would be near optimal.
And I think, Brent, I think we might have to, when people go back and listen to these podcasts, I think last week we were somewhat hopeful about some resolution for the crisis in the Middle East. But as we sit here today, it doesn't seem to be any closer to resolution.
No, and it's the end. It's a bit of a broken record, but it is the biggest thing going on at the moment from a global economic perspective, and it's more the same. It's disruptive, and it's got inflationary concerns. People listening to this, you can hear 1,000 stories about the cost of fertilizers gone up twice the price, and fuel prices are higher, and so on. These things all are bad news when you think about trying to recover beer consumption, because disposable incomes are not going to go up at the rate that some of this inflation impacts. So yeah, I guess it's a continued disruption. Is there a resolution? We'd hope so, but until you actually see something and that it is sustained for a period of time, I think this uncertainty is going to hang over the market, and I think it'll drag things down a little bit from an economic perspective.
And I think it'll be a bit like what we saw in COVID as well. Some of these overhangs will take some time to work their way through as well for the whole
Yeah.
industry.
There are some underlying little green shoots coming out. Maybe that's the third topic quickly on our market update. I guess we saw Heineken's Q1 results, which were compared to the last couple of years, were positive in the sense they were going in the right direction. I think their organic volume growth was minus 0.2. So let's call it more or less at
Flat.
break even, at flat. Given 3 years of decline,
Yep,
I chalk that up in the win category.
definitely.
It would have been great to have plus 1, 2%, but just the fact that it's turned flat, to use your term, I think that's a win. And if we get some more weather and people are out in the sunshine responsibly pursuing pints, then I think maybe we've got some chance for a 1% growth this year, I think would be a major win.
Absolutely. And I think it's what you were speaking about at the RMR conference as well. And it was also based on one of the Heineken slides, had the major brewers taken price for far too long over CPI, and beer had an affordability problem. So it's interesting to see Heineken maybe turning the corner on that.
Yeah, bearing in mind what we just talked about, if the Middle East disruption continues, then that could change that, right? Where brewers
Yeah,
may have to take further price increase, maybe more, even if they don't want to, in the pursuit of volume recovery, they may have to if inflation rears its head again. So I guess that's we're still in this, just like the crop, we're kind of in this in between period. It'd be great if this thing was it would be great. Ideal solution in summary, Danielle, it'd be nice if it rains on the next 3 Tuesdays and Wednesdays,
yes,
and if there was a resolution to things in the Middle East, we would have a chance to see something, as a much more positive turnaround for 2025.
absolutely. And up next, then, Brent, I think the Chilean malt supply chain, and I think with Fernanda and Andres from Maltexco, a fascinating dive into Chile.
Okay, so I would say live from Lisbon, but that's not totally true. We're recording this, but in Lisbon, and very pleased to have Fernanda and Andres from Maltexco. You'll give an introduction in a moment. So first of all, welcome to Lisbon.
Thank you.
First time I heard.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, me too.
Okay. And thanks for coming to the RMI conference. And most importantly, thanks for taking a few minutes here to educate me and listeners on what's going on in the world of malt from a Chilean perspective. So maybe we can start off with a little bit of an introduction.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure. I have been listening to the podcast, so it's a pleasure to be here to talk today. And well, I'm Fernanda Ellie, as you introduced already. At Maltexco, I'm the technical manager, so I lead R&D and innovation on one side and also quality in another side.
Thanks again, Brent. My name is Andres Donoso Torres. I'm the commercial manager in Maltexco. So I'm in charge of selling all the products that Fernanda is developing. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So a good team together that's going out to customers and delivering value, we'll say.
Yeah.
And Maltexco overall, maybe total tons you produce as malts. What's your capacity?
We're producing around 120,000 tons per year of malt. We use that malt for the beer industry and also for the food industry, especially for the beer. Almost 85-90% of the production is for the beer industry, and the rest is for the food industry. We're trying to increase the volumes every year. We did it for a couple of years, 2021 until 23, and then the beer industry not helped us very much. So we're trying to deal with the volumes that we have and the volumes that we're going to have the next years.
Yep. You're not alone. The entire global industry has
Yes.
has been knocked down the last 3 years. So take some comfort in the fact that it's not just impacting you. But and you mentioned as we were prepping for this, you produce extracts. Yeah.
Exactly.
And specialty malt.
Exactly. We produce like around 25 different malts, like base malts and caramel malts and other. We produce pearls.
We produce malt extracts, different varieties of malt extracts, liquid and also powder. We produce, we sell raw barley. We also do pearl barley and malt flour.
Okay.
So we have a milling
Yeah. So quite a range of
line as
products.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, a range of products. And maybe just to add a little bit to what Andrea just mentioned, Maltexco is still a family-owned company, so that's sort of like a little bit unique, maybe.
There's a few left, but not many.
There's a few left, but not many. And we actually very old, like we date from 1896. That was when the company was founded, and belongs to the family, the Chadwick family, which is the current owner, since 1916 from the foundation. And
It's good. Family business often comes with a long-term vision. Like they're not in it for short term.
Yeah.
They're in it for the long game. So it's good. On the whole product mix, so you're in innovation. So is there some new things that are coming along that are adding to that portfolio, or is that top secret? Is there anything we can talk about that would be interesting to say you're working on something that's going to change the world?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, most of the innovations, they just, come to help whatever the trends are going as well. So we were just talking before, like one of the products that we have been developing, probably our latest product that was developed was a malt that fits better on producing non-alcoholic or low alcoholic beer, so it has very low fermentable sugars. So that's one thing that's relatively new to the portfolio. And also in the food ingredients, I guess, there we have lots of innovations because especially on the malt extracts, lots of them are tailor-made in some ways for the big clients. Yeah.
So lots of work being done in that area, which
in
is
the labs.
good.
Yeah.
That's good. So you touched on it, so maybe we talk a little bit. The beer market, you have one major brewer operating. So the CCU is the biggest brewer in the country.
Yes, CCU is the biggest. CCU is Heineken in Chile.
Yeah.
They have around 65% of the market. ABI is around 33%.
Okay.
And the rest, just 2%, is the craft beer market. The craft beer market, we have around 300 different beers in Chile. They are increasing their volume in a very small percentage, but they're increasing. And the industrial market it's like the world. They are fighting a lot. I think last year the market fell like 1%, and this year they're trying to maintain the same volume of last year. We're not starting as well as we would like to, but there's a lot of optimism in Chile that they're going to try to maintain or maybe increase 1% of the volume for this year.
So that would give people in other parts of the world some optimism that we can actually see some kind of turnaround. So
I hope.
Let's hope. Yeah. Within that, are you seeing any shifts or changes in beer styles? Is it or more kind of recipe staying the same? Are you seeing the same kind of innovation work that you're doing on malt? Brewers, of course, are throwing all kinds of stuff out there to see what fits. So I guess you must see that in some way coming back to you from what the brewers are trying to do. Any examples that come to mind?
Yeah, they're working a lot in soft beers, like low alcohol, low
carbohydrates.
Exactly. Mixed with some flavors, lemons, orange,
raspberry, grapefruit, whatever.
Exactly.
Really.
Citrus has been a big trend for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're trying to get it, especially for the new generations that they're not drinking as much as before. So they're trying to reach them with different products to see maybe which one of them could increase a little bit or try to get into the market again. And they are trying maybe for a season, maybe for the summer. They are trying new products, and if they are good ones, they can stay in their portfolio. If they're not, they can take them away.
Yeah, I think they like competing a fair bit with, like, I don't know, cocktails or RTDs and things like that, trying to compete on that spectrum as well, like with all those different
Mm.
products with flavors and so
Yeah.
on. So
Mm.
yeah.
A win for the malt industry would be do all that, but do it with some kind of malt base.
Yeah,
That would be
hopefully.
the win-win. Yeah.
As long
Um,
there's
and-
malt on it, we
And I should have mentioned this or asked this earlier. From a cultural perspective, it must be a pretty good beer culture because you do have wine, of course, right?
Yes.
So how does that mix? Wine versus beer culture. What do people
drink them together.
drink both? Well, not at the same time, but you know what I mean. There's occasions, of course, I guess for different
Yes,
ones.
exactly.
But is it a strong beer culture in your?
It's a strong beer culture. It was a strong wine culture too, but well, all the alcohols in the world, I think, are decreasing their demand. They are talking about that the wine market is going to decrease around 20%. It's a very difficult situation for them. When we talk about the new generations, they're not drinking as much alcohol as before. That's especially for the wine market. The wine market is not convincing the new generations to drink. It's like more a formal moment of drink. It's more like a serious. I don't know why, but it's very difficult for the wine market, the situation that they are living right now. And for the beer, because they are working in more like light and easier products, it's much more easier for the young people to try them. I think when they're also bringing like products without alcohol or very small alcohol, I think they're also competing with non-alcoholic drinks like Coca-Cola or
sodas,
maybe exactly for a lunch and at every day of the week.
Yeah.
So they are trying with these products, and I think they're making good work.
Yeah.
But I might add something because regarding occasions, because I'm not originally from Chile. So when I came to Chile, there's one thing that caught my attention about the way that you drink beer is that you normally, when you gather with your friends, for instance, you drink a couple of beers, but then when you sit down at the table to eat, you change to wine. That's quite, I think,
exactly.
because for me as a Brazilian, that was weird because when we start drinking beer, we go all the way with beer.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we start with wine and go all the way with wine.
Yeah.
So here there is this like switch beer as an entree and then you get going with wine sort of thing. So
and at the end of the dinner, you change again.
You change again,
Yeah,
and then you go for
exactly.
the stilled.
Exactly.
It's
You
even
cover
worse.
all the groups.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, your point, Andres, is interesting. And I think we'll hear it this week. An inherent benefit of beer is it is generally lower ABV, and if you add to that the lower all the way down to non-alcohol. So, given what we're seeing on the consumer side, you would think that leads towards some opportunities for just the overall category of beer to potentially do well or do better but at the expense of wine and probably spirits, because it does seem consumers are really mindful of the alcohol they consume, and moderation seems to be a really big focus on the consumer level, which hopefully is some benefit coming back to beer and then malt and so on. So that's just a thought that maybe we can. You mentioned a little bit of food, so that naturalness piece. So you're also doing a lot of work on the food side of things, and so you've got beer production and all the things you do there with the brewers and the styles you mentioned. But you're doing a lot of work on the food side. So are you seeing that is growing, the food segment?
It's in our case the food market is growing because with all the new developments that we have done, we're reaching new clients in Latin America. We're working with big companies like Nestle, Nutresa, Mondelez. We're receiving good comments about our products, and that's helping us to increase a little bit. Because as Fernanda was saying before, the difficult part with the food industry is like to change a recipe. It could take you, I don't know, a couple of years to convince the company to change it or try to develop a new product. But in both cases, it takes a lot of time. We look forward to this market. We have I think have a lot of opportunities in this market, but it's going to take, I don't know, 1, 2, or maybe 3 years. It's slow, so we have to be patient.
Yeah. So that touches on another word that we use often is collaboration. So I guess as you're looking at these things, you're working on innovations. Brewers and food companies are working on things, and I guess that ends up being a very collaborative discussion in terms of you're trying to understand what they're trying to do, and you take that back and work on
exactly.
solutions that you hope help
Mm.
them get to where they are trying to go, and course correct along the way, I'm sure. And I guess that's part of what you do every day is
Yeah.
I don't want to say trial and error, but it's probably much more
Yeah.
prescribed. The other area, because we shared share some of this before we talked, but you've done a lot of work in the barley space, and working on in Chile to be. I know well enough some of the history. There used to be a time when Maltexco imported barley from elsewhere to
Yep.
produce locally, but that has changed.
Yes.
Also through a lot of hard work. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that movement to self-sufficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, um, as you said before, we used to source barley from a mixed model, so we would import most of the barley, and also do a little bit of contract farming as well. And then towards the last, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, we absolutely changed this model to the model that we have right now, where 100% of the barley that we have is originated in Chile. So there was like a few things that allowed this to happen, and they're related to the whole supply chain pretty much, right? So one of the things, the first thing that we've done, well, first of all, we need to understand how was the barley farming at that time. So the yields for barley were very low. So we were talking about 4.4 tons per hectare. So just to have an idea, what we have today is about 7.8 tons per hectare, So back at that time, the yield was so low that barley was not really a competitive crop. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that there was not really an alternative market for the barley that was out of spec of malting barley, So in Chile, we don't really have a big feed market or anything like that. So there is no incentive for the farmer to have a barley crop. So this is one thing. And then the way that we managed to change the whole supply chain is that, first of all, we started to build agreements with the breeders from Europe. So mostly breeders from France and from Germany. So we would bring varieties to Chile, trial them. So we established our own variety adaptation trial. So we will trial them to see how they perform into Chilean environment. And with that, we were able to make the bring varieties that were way more competitive in terms of yield for the farmer than what we used to have, So that's one thing. And the other thing that we've done is that we changed the way that we did the contracts for the farmers and also for the brewers. So we were prioritizing long-term partnerships. Also, we had a different price structure that was very important. And also with the brewers start to prioritizing as well the national supply, the national sourcing of barley, So this way we could do a better distribution between the risk and the value. And the third thing that we've done is that we further developed the alternative market for barley that was out of spec. And that's very relevant because at that time, we had already, milling, for instance, was not something new to Maltexco. So we used to already have a mill and have a malt extract plant. However, when we decided to go for this strategy and develop the whole supply chain in Chile, we decided to expand that and also to modernize some of our plants, get all the certifications and all the regulations that, the top food clients would require. So then we adapt our standards to be able to meet, the criteria for, the highest level that is required by the food industry. So with those three things, in hand, we could, what we can say that nowadays we have been able to build a very sustainable and competitive value chain for the barley in Chile.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I, as you mentioned that and talked through the outlet for the feed, which you've developed, is good. Because if you thought it from a farmer perspective, that's a risk to the farmer. Because if you couldn't take that barley for malting and you just turned the problem back to the farmer, that's not going to help in that long-term partnership approach, right? So, and that's a learning that I think could go around the world. Is I always come back to farmers are independent business owners, and they make decisions based on what's best for them. And if you give them more risk, they will have to take that into consideration, and they don't have to grow barley or malting barley particularly. So I think it's quite an innovative approach to you've had to solve the whole problem, because ideally you wanted the malting barley, but you couldn't just take the malting barley and leave the problem for someone else. Because the other thing I say, farmers also have a long memory.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
when you rejected their barley, they'd say, 15 years ago you rejected my barley, and they still remember that. So you have to work in that environment as well.
That's true. You said it's a hard job because you have to look after everything.
And from a customer perspective, you mentioned it, the move to self-sufficiency. So now the malt you produce is from barley produced in Chile. And what do the customers think of that? They must view that favorably. Is that
yes?
Have they gone so far, or do you think they would think about how could they link that to a brand? Are they, because there are parts of the world where you would tell a barley story and that would pass through and be told through the brand, which I think is ultimately where we need to do more to bring that barley story to life.
Selling the story.
Yep.
Yeah, totally agree. We try to use that like a commercial or marketing benefit, and our clients look for it. They like it, but unfortunately, then we come to the price. When the market is not as good as we want, finally at the end, the decision is about pricing. Unfortunately, but all these concepts about a national product and all the traceability that we can make from the grains until the malt that we give to our clients and everything. Our clients, there's a value on it. In the beer market, not as much as we would like to, but especially in the food market, there's a huge opportunity. So we are trying to use all that and as I was saying, like a benefit for our products, and it works.
Yeah. So locally sourced is good, and we talked a bit about the naturalness of malt and the benefits that could be to expand the portfolio, and maybe still in even traditional uses for beer, that there's still a good story to tell on that local sourcing. Put a picture of a farmer on the brand and tell that story.
Yeah, we try to do it. Yeah. Some customers like it, others they don't care much about it, but we use it.
I guess as an industry, we're just not as good as marketing malt as, for instance, the hop guys, they've done a much better job on that sense, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well,
there's room for improvement.
I joked with you when we met last night briefly, I was telling you too much about my presentation, which I know you'll keep secret, but in that, I think I think the barley story is the most important one. I used to be in the malting industry, and when I tried to explain to people what I did working in malt, it was hard work. Like the concept of what malting is and the process, and it's related to brewing, but what is it exactly? I think that is just a tough sell. But the farm story, I think consumers can get that picture, because they know farmers, but they know what farmers do. And if you can explain to them the barley that goes through that and ends up in the beer and in the food, I think that's easier to connect with consumers, and therefore that storytelling will be easier. So for maltsters, I start to state or claim or make the suggestion, don't keep trying to push the malt story uphill. Just go to the other story you have, which is very, very strong, which is that barley story, because I think that has the potential that you could actually resonate that with consumers and get them to buy into those products, including food. So you've got
of course.
So maybe to move towards wrapping this up, what's your level of optimism for the beer and food industry from a Chilean standpoint? Are you optimistic that this thing will turn around and there's a good future? I hope the answer is yes. But tell me how. Maybe I'll answer it this way. How optimistic are you? So number one, you have to be optimistic, but give me a sense of how optimistic you are about the beer market in Chile.
No, I'm really optimistic because a couple of things, but especially because this year we changed our president. So the economy is starting to be much more, there's a much more optimistic about the economy in Chile. So I think that will let the people to start spending a little bit of more money. Last years were very tough in a political and economic situation. So I think I am positive, but if we can maintain this year the volume of last year, I think it's very good. And from next year, 2027, maybe start increasing them. I think it's going to be very good for the beer industry.
Good.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I might just add a little bit, but on the food sector, maybe. I'm very optimistic as well. Well, we have to be, first of all, but also, like we were talking before, all these trends that we're seeing on the food industry about cleaning labels. So getting off, for instance, e-values, additives, artificial coloring. We see lots of that tendency already. And I think there, some of the ingredients that we have that are derived from malt or from barley, such as the malt extract, for instance, can play a very important role as well. So unfortunately, that's slow. So as we were talking, that, in the food industry, there is, as in the brewery, but even worse, there's lots of regulation about labeling. So any change that you make in the labeling, incorporating a new product or getting rid of an ingredient, it takes long. Depending, of course, on the regulated agency, the country, it might be different, but it takes long. But still, I think it's something that eventually it's going to be reflected on sales as well.
Yep. So there's opportunities there for sure.
Yes.
Okay. Last question, because the title of the podcast is Pursuing the Perfect Pint. What, in a Chilean viewpoint, what would the perfect pint look like from your perspective? Start with you, Fernanda.
Okay, for me, it's hard because I'm Brazilian. So I have a
But you
Brazilian...
can, a Brazilian Chilean
You have been
experience.
living in
half
Chile for, I don't know, like 8 years.
Brazilian, half Chilean standpoint. Well, because when I said to you, one of the questions is I'm absolutely sure you're going to make is this one, what's a perfect pint. So for me, it's a lager. I'm Brazilian, so we drink lots of lager. And we not only drink lager, but we drink really, really cold lager, like hopefully the closest to zero. And of course, the setting is very important as well. So hopefully by the beach with, nice summertime.
Yeah.
So friends, that'll
Very
be
good.
perfect. Yeah.
I have to think the same with Fernanda. We are part of the same team. I'm completely agree with what she's saying. I think that the Chilean market is trying to looks a lot of to the Brazilian market, and the lagers are the beer that we are most consuming in Chile for far.
And we need to convert the Chileans to, if they start with beer, stay with beer. Like
exactly.
Don't make that conversion
Don't
over
change.
to wine. I know that's a challenge, but we can get there. So, well, thanks to both of you for taking some time and sharing some of your insights on Chile, and we'll definitely share a perfect pint this week, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
we will.
Thank you very much.
Well, I have to say, Brent, I'm a little bit biased on this one because when I read their submission for the Excellence Awards, I was blown away about what they've achieved. And I think they've probably in this podcast explained exactly why they were such worthy recipients.
Yeah, it's a good story. And of course, they won the Excellence Award. So I think that a testament to that. But I guess I would add, it's like Chile they do have, of course, barley production. It's not the easiest place in the world to grow barley, but they've persevered and they've gone into self-sufficiency. So I guess, it's an example when you put your effort behind it, you can actually do some pretty good things, and they set some goals and achieved it. So I guess it's good to hear because that can be done elsewhere in the world. And I guess it's another way, I guess we're congratulating them on winning the Excellence Awards for, moving their program forward as they did.
And I think the other thing, it sort of, people alluded to it a little bit at the conference, but I think a really important point for other maltsters listening here as well is they sound like, they have quite advanced relationships with people like Nestle and Mondelez, but calling out the length of time it takes to get some of those ingredient changes through the process. So if we talk about, as Jorge said, making malt every moment of the day, one of our barriers just might be the speed or the pace at which some of these food ingredient companies, adapt to having malt inclusion in some of their recipes.
Yeah, well, I think 2 points, Danielle, because I don't think brewers are any quicker in the pace of change as we No,
Took out a different one. I took out that we were lightning fast in comparison.
You're a brewer, so you are maybe biased, but I'm not. So I can say I think the first key point is having that view to what the food industry is doing is massively important because that's where the potential is. Because beer has not been growing as we've talked about, endlessly, and we've had the reset on whiskey, and that's why people like Souffle Malt are talking about, finding other outlets for malt and food and maybe alternative beverages are the point. So getting that perspective of what the area is, and that here's Maltexco doing a lot of work in that space, so that's good to hear, and others can learn from it. Pace of change is slow, and it sounds like it's slow in food. I would say it's slow in brewing and distilling as well for good reason.
Yeah.
Those are things that would slow things down, and I would say when it comes to barley, for example, you know, the slow pace of new variety development. We talked
Yes.
about last week about Australia. They've kind of moved it quite nicely forward, so we could probably learn something from that because that just brings better agronomic benefits to farmers and that helps the whole supply chain move forward. So you can see, we're not a perfect place, but there's lots of examples where we're moving in a very positive direction.
Absolutely. And I think finally, a great beer culture in Chile, which is super. So pursuing the perfect pint there.
Yeah, if anything, I guess I said at the beginning, touring and getting into the four corners of the earth, whatever that means and looks like. This is great because I find it interesting. I hope others do. Like, it's really interesting to hear what's going on. What are consumers doing? What's the shifts? Are people drinking different? Are they drinking more beer, more wine? In this case, less wine, and so on. So I think those are things. Those little facts are interesting when you hear from different people in different parts of the world, because otherwise you'd have to travel to Chile and do it. I'm happy to give that a go. So I would be happy to go there, and maybe we'll find our way to Chile in the future for one of our regional summits. But in the meantime, I think hearing from people like Fernanda and Andres is a great way to give that vantage point from different parts of the world, and people can take that as they wish.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brent, cheers. Seeing you next week for another episode.
The sun's shining. Go out there and pursue the perfect pint, and let's hope it rains on Wednesday.
Cheers.
Cheers.